I would like now to invite the panelists. As we invite them to the panel, we'll do it step by step. Each of them will have the opportunity to present his view or his concept which relates to this management and automation of network and service end-to-end. And then we will invite them to sit, and then we will start with the panel itself. So I would like to start with Joan Meyer from Telstra. I think everyone knows you, but anyway, she has more than 25 years in the OSS BSS industry. She's a global evangelist in Network as a Service 2020, part of the Telstra Networks 2020 Transformation Group. Prior to that, she was the Director of Product Marketing, focusing on orchestration at Oracle, ICT Account Manager with Ericsson Australia, Senior Analyst with Analysys Mason, leading the Service Provider Program and Marketing Director for Nokia, good to know, former Alcatel-Lucent, OSS BSS Solution. So, Joan, please present your view and join us to the panel.
Thank you, Nurit. Oh. No? Okay, good. Thank you, Nurit. We're giving 2 slides for presenting, and since this is for ETSI ZSM, I thought that I showed how our NAS architecture at Telstra, how it would really fit as an implementation of what the ETSI ZSM is building right now. So ETSI ZSM is really focused predominantly at the network and service management layers, so more from the network domain as opposed to the traditional OSS and BSS. So in our architecture, if we look at the customer sales and services and IT systems that I had displayed in the NAS architecture, this would be the equivalent of where the digital storefront would live. And then after that, we have the interdomain integration fabric, which is basically our NAS platform, which is our abstraction fabric. And where the ETSI fabric here, as you can see, it's the same thing where the digital storefront can order through the integration fabric, so through our NAS platform, and it can either order straight for an inter-management domain from any management domain, or it could also go in and get the information from service management. Now, it doesn't preclude, because at ETSI ZSM architecture, we're still not at the API level, we're still only at stage 2. And basically, we're still talking about exposing, as Uwe's talked about, just a network service and hiding the resource within each of the domains. So at this point, we are very much aligned. And whereas Telstra is more of an implementation, so we have selected the APIs to work over the integration fabric. And just to give you an example, in terms of thinking about automation, as I mentioned this morning, we want to have exposure. So we want to have our network exposing everything about the network service. So for example, we could have the service specification would say the service supports 10, 20, 50, 100 megs. Then I could have also supports 20, 30, 40 milliseconds of latency. And so this parts of characteristics. Now, when it goes up into the product catalog, my product manager decides that from that type of information, they can create an SLA with the customers, and one SLA could be gold, which would mean latency of less than 20 milliseconds and speed equal or greater to 50 megabit, and silver would mean with the 30. Now, when we have this and when there's an order coming in, then we have to make sure that the gold level is always met, which means that it needs to make sure that it's running latency and speed tests. It monitors all the time to make sure that nothing gets threshold, and then an activity, a closed loop activity needs to happen. And so these are the types of automation, but understanding what things happens where and where the definition is something that's quite important, because definitely we want the network side to take more activity and more action and more definition, so that there's a lot less knowledge that is required at the OSS-BSS, because the OSS-BSS only needs to know very, very little about attributes or the resource level. Yeah? So the next presenter.
Thank you, John. And by this I want to invite Juan Carlos from Telefonica. He's the Director of Technology and Architecture and the Global CTO. He's worked in telecom sector since graduating as telecom engineer at the UPM University. He joined Telefonica in 1990 and worked as that time as a researcher at the R&D unit, developing communication software stacks, IP networks, and digital TV solutions. In parallel, he worked as associate professor in the university. In 1998, he moved to the Latin America business unit, being in charge of the transformation projects in the region. After this, in 2020, he took the role of Deputy Director of Business Development at Telefonica Data Europe, launching fixed and broadband networks and business in Telefonica in Italy, Germany, and UK. And then he joined the Global CTO unit when it was founded in 2006, taking several director roles, fixed access, transport, architecture, plan, and operations. And since 2015, he has been back at Telefonica Global CTO unit, first as a director for transport network optimization and later as a director of radio access network. He was appointed as representative at GSMA Technology Group and nominated as a delegate at the NGMN board. With the merger of IT and network units in Telefonica 2017, he became director of technology and architecture, both for network and the systems. So as part of the current role, he's focused on end-to-end digitalization of processes and end-to-end virtualization of the network. And definitely, this is so much relevant to what we are discussing today. So thank you for joining.
Thank you. Well, long introduction. Sorry, 29 years working in Telefonica, so has given for a lot of activity. No? Well, I want to tell you a bit about our view of what is the long-term in automation. So key concepts. I don't want to get into details, but of course, we see a nature of networks that is changing to be more heterogeneous and distributed. So the architecture we have seen up to now is totally changing. The network functions are changing the natural place where they were installed and located. And this place may change dynamically. So I would say it's a moving architecture. Data control and management planes are plastic or elastic, call it whatever, so they need to adapt to this changing nature. Also, there will be interfaces, distributed smart interfaces, implementing protocols and models for all these AI and policy-based and intent-based processes. In terms of user requirements and policies, so we will speak another language of intent that Cliff was introducing at the beginning. Also, in terms of operating policies, we'll have new necessities to implement mechanisms that combine requests from multiple tenants and also multiple slice environments. This is something new as well. The mechanisms for sensing and acting, we'll have to define open and extensible mechanisms to collect information and also consume or implement the action flows to apply over the network and IT infrastructure. We will need also converged data models, and converged means both for OSS and automatic orchestration mechanisms for definition and monitoring of services and also for action representation. So all this is also new and the trend to the future on our view. There will be new issues related to regulation and security. Okay, it's getting relevant, the data sovereignty, so who is the owner of the data and how this data need to be protected and accessed and controlled. Also will become more important the identity management to understand who is accessing the data, who is acting on the network, what kind of information he's allowed to access to, what is the kind of operations they can do on the data and on the information, and all this needs to be strictly controlled by operators. Another important aspect is non-repudiation and accountability. So it needs to be registered who is requesting things on the network, who is requesting access to data on the network, which data they are collecting, what they are doing with the data, and all this needs to be registered in network ledgers that can be consulted and cannot be violated or changed. No? Here, technologies like blockchain will have a relevant impact on networks. And finally, the closed loop operation and criticality of the infrastructure. We were talking about what is the role of humans in all this. So humans will have to stay on the loop. So someone needs to ultimately understand what is done with the data, what is done on the network, why the decisions are made, even if they are done by an artificial intelligence, and control and verify that all policies that are generated and all the actions that are applied on the network are the right ones. Also, we need to understand very well what is the artificial intelligence doing. So we need intelligibility of how they have taken the decisions and got to the conclusions and recommend certain actions and even apply them automatically. And also apply security mechanisms to avoid that there is a proper, or there is an improper access or operation on the network. So this is a future that is, of course, much more complex, a future in which we will need a lot of automation as well to control all this complex environment. And what will be first and second steps? So what can we do now to get there to this long-term vision? So in the morning, I already introduced our view on what are the steps we need to give. And we are giving, we are at this moment on the journey. Network softwareization and application of rule-based automation. So this is something we are doing today. The process is not completed. So virtualization of networks has started in the core network. It needs to be reaching the central office and the access network. Also, we need to complete the implementation of software-defined network functionality over the transport network to virtualize and softwareize it as well, and be able to have this orchestration end-to-end. We need also to evolve the mechanisms we implemented for self-organizing networks that were the first step in automating part of the processes that we run on our network, that is optimization, and extend it probably to planning and assurance. Prepare the infrastructure, important for managing all this intelligence and data handling, the big data platforms, the data layers I mentioned this morning, also all the infrastructure of artificial intelligence models and tools. Maybe part of them will be applied from the cloud, as Cliff mentioned. Some others will have internally in-house developed by the operator or by third parties supporting the operator, specialized third parties. We'll have to leverage and start doing extensively on standards and open source. That is extremely relevant to prepare for the future. Lots of collaboration and interworking, essential to avoid fragmentation and allow an harmonious way forward. An example of this is initiatives like the one launched by the ZSM to try to align OSM and ONAP and allow a kind of interoperability between different orchestration solutions. And finally, exploring emerging technologies. There are many technologies that have been applied for some years in IT that will have to be translated and adapted to the network environment. The first example is the network function virtualization. It's all the application of the experience on virtualizing the IT environment to the network. Many other things will have to come. The continuous integration, continuous development process, the service-based architecture, the distributed artificial intelligence, the preparation of data sets for machine learning. All this that has been already applied in other industries will have to start bringing massively to the telecom industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was, of course, very much exciting to see the both presentations from John and you, very much aligned with what we do in ZSM, but this is very obviously because you're part of this. And now I would like to invite Peter Koning from Verizon, which is the head of product development in Verizon Europe. He is managing enterprise networks and manages services for EMEA, LATAM and Canada at Verizon, and brings with him more than 20 years of product managing IT and telecom solutions for enterprise customers. In his current role, he is responsible for managing the regional requirements for the Verizon virtualized network services, enabling products for resellers in regions, and optimizing the access solutions. So thank you for joining us, and please.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so obviously I had a session already this morning. I made my life easy and decided to reuse 2 slides to the example we've had before. As a recap, our goal within Verizon, because obviously Verizon is a huge company, the area where my team is focused is on delivering virtualized network services and the required automation linked to that to enterprise customers, global enterprise customers. And when we started on that journey, the decision was really made to do this in a modular fashion. We wanted to be able to go to market relatively quickly. We wanted to learn from our customers while we were basically developing our products. To the points which was made earlier, we need to be able to react more quickly to changing requirements. We can't spend 18 months thinking about a technological solution and then another 12 months developing it internally. We need to get stuff out a lot faster, fail fast, and then move forward. So this modular approach is based on an OpenStack approach, which also, from a deployment perspective, looks at deploying this. Both is cloud-based, where we are deploying it either in our own cloud environment, in non-Verizon cloud environments, for example, Amazon. We've started with Amazon. We'll be adding a few others later on as well, and then on our own UCPE white box environment as well. But it remains, an identical environment which we use just to make it more manageable from our perspective. If you then look at the platform itself, as I indicated this morning, 3 main layers. Where we consider to be that presentation layer to be the absolute key, because that brings us closest to to our customers. Our customers need to have not only visibility on what is happening, they want to have a sense of control, an ability to control what across our services as well. Then obviously the middle piece, which is a modular approach, we want to be able to pick and choose between different vendors, different technologies. And I think Joanna made a point earlier today that indeed some of our partners look at this as almost threatening. Because yes, we could indeed plug something out, plug something else in. I'd say that the partners who come to us and who are really working with us on making that easy for us, those are the ones we'll probably use. Because today, the plugging in and the plugging out is still very, very painful. And we spend far too much time on figuring that out. So, as an industry, the larger industry is concerned, that would definitely make a lot of sense if we could spend more time on that. And then, lots of discussion around APIs. We focus a lot on that on that as well. About a year ago, Verizon actually did, together with Colt, and a cross-carrier automation proof of concept across 2 live networks, where we were able to influence or impact the Colt network. They were able to do the same on our side. Interesting, of course, to do this. But this is really the direction which we will need to start moving into. We cannot only have that flexibility at the virtualized network services layer. We need to look one layer below us as well, and obviously doing something on an operator by operator level, is hardly scalable. So that's definitely a key area from our perspective. And then, to the points made earlier, from our perspective, our customers in reality don't care about any of this. They only care about, whatever term we want to use, business outcome, intent, whatever. That's what they worry about. We need to be able to ensure that our offering, is actually able to deal with that. So I've already talked about that this morning. Another element I think we need to be very conscious about is that this, has a huge impact on the organization internally, but also at our customers now. Definitely internally, if I see as we are rolling out these new services, as we are implementing them with our customers, this has an immediate impact on our own organization. And one of the elements which we have started to look at as well is how do we find a way to ensure that knowledge gets shared in a more efficient way. We used to be able to say, we'll roll out a training on whatever topic. And then we would go to learning and development, they would plan it and roll it out over, 6 months, 9 months from a global perspective. This is unimaginable now. We need to, so we're actually working with our learning and development colleagues to try and figure out, how do we do this so that, the knowledge which inherently becomes available as we start to implement some of these initial customer networks becomes shareable, so that, it becomes more of a, yes, I learn, but I start to share what I've learned so that, the rest of the organization becomes stronger as well. And that, I think, is an absolute key element to be able to be successful in this area. If not, you'll end up with, and we've already seen that in some instances, this concept of automation fatigue, where some of the departments or some individuals will start to say, this is too difficult. Why don't we just go back to what we know, because we know this works. And so this is something, this is a dangerous element which we need to be extremely careful about, because if we go along with that idea, we will never reach this, and then those operators who don't reach that will be relegated down to very small lean and mean machines selling some basic bandwidth services across the globe, and that's about it. So that's what I wanted to just summarize. Thank you.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much for the insight. I think. Okay, so I would like to invite now Walter Pryor from Nokia. He's the global head of business development of digital operations. Thank you, Walter.
Does it work now? Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and really humbled by the brain power I've witnessed in this one day, honestly. And I think, most of what was said, we start seeing repeating patterns, right? We know, or I believe, people in this room and the industry overall knows what needs to be done. I think we just need now to find the ways of getting it done and getting it done fast. So I also will share with you a couple of slides. This is the future network and service automation by Bell Labs Research, okay, part of the Nokia group. It's not extremely different from what we've seen from the other presenters. So the decoupling of domains, okay, the open interface capability to be able actually to drive this interoperability and looking at the service from a dimension that abstracts from the network. So, and when we talk about network and service automation, I wonder, looking back to the previous slide that was not my slide, should we be talking about business automation, right? I think the end game, when I go and talk with executives around the globe, last week I was in Tokyo and so on and so forth, ideally, and this doesn't happen this way, but a good example from Uwe on the strategic intent, actually CSPs or DSPs, if we could automate the money printing machine, that would be just fine, right? Forget the network, forget the service. If you can automate a money printing machine, that's great. It doesn't happen that way. It needs to have an underlying service that they promote and they expose, and that's what we need to assure. I think automating is very much also on making choices. You will not automate everything, hopefully, okay? Not everything should be automated. And it's about making those intelligent choices on what impacts the most in your business as to takes the first place in the automation, let's say, queue. So I think with that, we're able actually to make a meaningful impact in the industry. We've shared here some ideas about this co-responsibility between vendors, industry standards, CSPs, and it is an ecosystem. We are in the telco business, like it or we're not. We are not web scale companies. It's difficult to transform. We're talking about a lot digital transformation. Maybe it's just playing a little bit with words, but we'd rather see it more as a reinvention and taking all of this legacy forward. To some aspects, is actually a constraint that is dragging us down. I mean, maybe there is no other option, but I like to challenge ourselves, and that happens in us, the vendors. So I work for Nokia, and we think very much of flying our own jets. I think going digital and automating real time means we have to be digital ourselves, right? Talking with a very dear customer in Mexico, where I spent the last 3-4 years of my life, there was a set of key initiatives that was being workshopped on the VP of Digital Transformation. And some of those steps, I will not divert too much. I'm looking at the counter here, it's like a ticking clock. So, but some of those steps were like HR processes. Where those come into the play of being a digital service provider? I think they do. In the end, until we start feeling and thinking end-to-end digital and automate this small HR, these service processes, the offering, the exposure, the maintenance, the field force, the contracting, it becomes difficult, because if we benchmark ourselves against the web scales, that's how they were born digital and native digital. So I think here I think a little bit more on the underlying vision of this several loops. Okay, that was covered already. So we would have the different closed loops within the domains, and eventually a big service management loop, and you can have even a bigger one, which is a business management loop. So in the end, I think we need to bring closer the business to the networks. It's an enabler, okay? And this, it was mentioned already, I think, by everyone on this close connection between assurance and fulfillment, okay? We are talking about ephemeris services that get designed, provisioned, instantiated, and ramped down in 3 hours. That's the full life cycle. So there's no time for offline assurance. It has to happen real time, right? So I think that's a bit of the vision we try to bring in as Nokia, and how we're trying to support this, let's say, ecosystem automation, some of the ideas. So I think exhausted the 3 minutes. It's good.
Okay, thank you, Walter. And last but not least, Andreas, please. Just mentioned that Andreas kindly stepped in to substitute Intel, Alex Wolf from Intel, that couldn't come because of some personal issues. So Andreas, thank you for doing that, and please.
The last one. I make it short, right? Everything was said was really needed, and that was very sophisticated already. You asked me yesterday because I shortly jumped in. I need 2 charts from you. What are you standing for? So show me the 2 charts. I need to click myself. Basically, I'm standing for what our customers need. So what your operators and customers need, right? So the end customers wants to have self-service without having human intervention. You just want to click a button and the machinery runs and gives me a firewall, an SD-WAN, whatever is needed. So I want to have that. So now you as an operator want to be fast in delivery. We talked about that, the 18 months or 24 months of producing a product. So it's definitely need something where we need to be far more faster. And finally, I have the problem to achieve more, maybe with less engineers in the future, because there are so many more services, so many more technologies. So we need to cope with the technology. So how do we need to address this? Well, the first one is easy, zero-touch automation. That's why we are all here. Yeah. But how you achieve that, there are main differentiations. In particular, when I'm speaking for a chief marketing officer, right? I want to have a product. Today, it has an SD-WAN. Tomorrow, it needs a slice. I just want to swap the composition of my service easy like that, just draw a line, and tomorrow it's run. Hey, this is a dream. We are close getting there already. So, and the last thing is, now avoid coding. As long as you need to do workflow coding, if you do it with a model or whatever, as long as the code is something separate from the model you want to achieve, you still have a trouble, because you can only address those situations which you plan. But in a complex world with 5G, dynamic edges, dynamic popping up network function, etc., you cannot cope just with one way. You just need to have an engine which finds out what is the way today to go. That's what I'm standing for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.